Hello and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Stacey Suter, and I'm the PYA's Marketing and Communication Manager, and I'll be moderating the webinar for today. So thank you to all of our participants and panel who have joined us today. We decided to arrange this webinar given the amount of crew who've been affected by the sanctions and the seizures of Russian-linked vessels. And hopefully provide crew with some advice and specifically for crew who are unsure of what to do if they've been requested to move a vessel, how they can reclaim unpaid wages or their repatriation costs. So most importantly, we want to allow you as participants to ask questions and gain further clarification on the written advice which we released 2 weeks ago. And after our introductions, we'll give the floor to the panel for 20 minutes, and then we'll address all the questions that you as attendees can ask in the chat. So please go ahead and start submitting your questions to the chat. And after we've gone through the advice from the panel, we can go on to them. So for those of you who do not know, the PYA has a member assistance service. And this service is a team of PYA representatives who offer confidential, unbiased advice to all crew, so not just PYA members. So if you have a specific question or an onboard issue which you'd like to get advice on, please email our team on advice@pya.org. So that's advice@pya.org. And then just finally, we're also offering all crew who have joined us today a 20% discount on our PYA membership. So you can get that if you sign up as a member via our website using the code WEB20. So that's WEB20 via our website. So without further ado, I'm just going to introduce you to our panel for today. So Rod, can you just take 1 minute to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon all. I've been in yachting for 53 years with a 7-year interregnum. Captain of merchant vessels. I've been a PYA member since almost the beginning. I've been council member since MLC loomed on the horizon. And for a few years now, I've been a director with a special responsibility for training on the deck side.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rod. Christoph, over to you.
Thank you, Stacey. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, all. My name is Christophe Bourillon, the Chief Executive of the PYA, and my role today will really be to answer, general high-level questions and questions that Rod, who is our expert today, won't be able to answer, but very unlikely. Thank you, Stacey.
Perfect. Thanks, Christoph. Okay, so Rod, I'm going to start by asking you to please just talk us through the advice for crew on Russian-linked vessels. So firstly, what advice is there for crew who've been asked to move a Russian-linked yacht? So if they're a crew member on a Russian-linked yacht and they've been asked to move it, what advice can we give them?
The vessel is Russian-linked. It can be linked in many ways. It could be Russian-flagged. It could be owned by a Russian individual or a Russian company and under another flag. The particularity here is whether or not the vessel has been formally sanctioned or detained. If a vessel may have a Russian connection, so in other words, if any of the people at this webinar today are on a yacht, which they know has got a Russian owner, or there's a Russian family involved, or there's some sort of Russian connection, but nothing has officially been said about the status of that vessel, then that vessel is no different from any other vessel. And to move it, well, the person that's going to move it obviously going to get a captain. If the captain receives his orders through the normal channels, then he's acting in compliance with his normal responsibilities to the owning entity, and any crew who are on that vessel are just going about doing their jobs. I did have a question last week, which came up.
Oh, sorry, Rod, we can't hear you. It's gone off for a second.
Is this better now?
Yes, that's perfect.
Yeah, a question correctly, last week.
Oh,
Oh, you've gone off again, Rod. I think you've just moved your microphone.
Let me try and fix that.
Okay, we can hear you now, but as
Okay.
you started speaking, it went off.
All right. Are we good to go?
Yes.
Okay. Last week, I had a question from somebody who is concerned that maybe crew who obeyed an order from a captain to move a vessel that was Russian owned could face prosecution for collusion in some illegal activity by a Russian entity. That is not the case. If the crew are just doing their job and they're moving a vessel, may have a Russian connection, there is no need to worry about any possible comeback on them. If a vessel has been sanctioned, then it's been seized. Everybody would know about it. The port officials would have made it quite clear. Then that vessel cannot be moved, but under other circumstances, there should be no problems.
Perfect. Thanks, Rod. Okay, so just moving on slightly, please can you tell us what crew should do if their vessel has been sanctioned? So, I mean, you've just said that it'll be obvious that they'll know that the vessel's been sanctioned, but what are the sort of things that crew will need to consider if they have if the boat's been seized?
Start worrying. The next thing is to assemble a personal dossier of their rights to have been serving on that vessel, just in case, because it would depend on the port state control. Within a port state, it may depend on any individual port, what will happen to a detained vessel. Now, one thing that is not going to happen is probably the funding of that vessel, unless the funding is going to come through a management company, which still either has a credit with the owning entity and it is then willing to disperse it. The management company may not be willing to disperse those funds because the vessel's been sanctioned, then that means the owning entity is being sanctioned as well. So that means that the funding to the vessel could well dry up, which after a few days is going to have an impact on, for instance, fresh food deliveries on board. What any given port would do regarding shutting off of shore power, regarding shutting off of fresh water, we don't know. It's going to depend on a case-by-case basis, but it's quite probable that after a certain period, then crew will be required to pack up and leave, and so they should be ready to take with them all their personal possessions. Anything that they can't physically take for some reason, they should photograph and document, and then make sure they've got every possible record they can lay their hands on about their service on board that vessel. Get their discharge book filled up, get copies of crew lists, copies of any document that they possibly can think of, which are evidence that they've been on that vessel, because when they get off, obviously they're going to have some outstanding claims for wages and accumulated leave.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rod. So, I mean, this is along the same lines as access to funds, but what should crew do to try and cover their repatriation costs? So if they do have to leave the vessel, how can they, get access to funds? I mean, we know a lot of the Russian banking systems have been cut off. What should crew do?
If they're on a commercial vessel, then they will have a right to repatriation. The problem is how to exercise that right. Also, as was mentioned in our advisory, there will be an insurance in place to cover the costs of repatriation if the vessel owner, for whatever reason, is unable to do so. The problem is the mechanism of obtaining that money. So first off, the crew are going to have to rely on their own resources, their own credit cards, if they're required to leave the vessel. They need to maintain contact with the captain, and the captain with whatever management company he or she is dealing with, to follow up on the issue of unpaid claims, financial claims by crew. There's not a lot immediately that crew can do, but they should be ready to register their individual claims with the flag state and with the port state, but they cannot do that until they have not been paid. There's nothing they can do beforehand.
Okay. So I think that's pretty much answers my next question, was going to be, in terms of recovering unpaid wages, is that the process that crew will need to go through?
Yes, they need to have evidence of entitlement.
Perfect.
And of course, the SEA is going to be a major part of that. And a copy of the official logbook, if possible, and the discharge book showing the last time that they actually joined the vessel.
Perfect. Okay. So I can see a lot of questions are coming through in the chat, so everyone can just keep on popping your questions in there, and at the end we'll go through them. I think the last question I'm going to ask you, Rod, before we then move on to the questions, is there was a sort of updated regulation that was released by the French Maritime, so the French Coast Guard, about 2 weeks ago, just on the rights of passage and port access for Russian-linked vessels. Could you just tell me a little bit about whether or not Russian-linked boats can still move within EU waters and access the ports? Because we know within the UK this is not allowed.
Unsanctioned vessels, to the best of our knowledge, information and belief up to the present time, still have a right of what's called innocent passage in the UK, and that can mean passage to enter a passage either through territorial waters en route to somewhere, or it can be right of passage through territorial waters to reach a port. That right of innocent passage to reach a port in the UK is closed now, because on arrival in port, any Russian associated vessel is going to be stopped. There are ways in which vessels which have got some kind of Russian connection, but are not necessarily officially sanctioned, are being punitively dealt with anyway, by perhaps refusals of local suppliers of fuel, for instance, to top up their tanks. Now you've got mute.
I was on mute. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so you've answered sort of our broader questions. I think what I'm going to do is, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add, Rod, on the general advice before we move on to the questions.
No, we're probably going to find, as is generally the case in these sessions, that the experts are actually sitting out there in front of the panel, and that interaction with each other and through exchange of information on their questions, they're going to get some useful feedback from each other.
Perfect. Okay. Right, so I think, Rod, what the best thing to do is let's just jump directly into the questions, and I think this will spur on a lot more discussion. So firstly, we've been told that there is possibility, even if the yacht is not freezed or seized, that the UK based, and then in brackets Channels Cayman, that pays a salary may be to interdict further to pay our salary and cannot use the cash on board or the boat credit card in order to pay or repatriate crew. Sorry, that was a little bit combobulated, but hopefully you got the gist of that.
What was the source of this?
Oh, sorry, of the
source of this information? Is that official circulation, or is just this hearsay?
So this is just a question that has come through in the chat.
And I think, Rod, you asked the very right question. The source of the question is not indicated. So if it comes from a reputable source, either government or all, I guess it can be trusted. But we haven't seen anything like that as far as I know personally.
No, I can't think on what legal grounds currently there'd be a case for that. I don't see how anybody can even possibly monitor the use of cash on board. Very hard to monitor what credit cards being used for until there's a sort of interregnum of 4 months while the credit card accounts are totted up and then distributed by the holding company. It sounds to me very unlikely.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, Rod. And so another question's coming in here, and I think this is a important one. Is there a source of information where we can see the list of sanctioned owners? So is there an EU website or somewhere where we can access that publicly?
I can take this one if you want.
Yep, go for it.
There was an EU list of not sanctioned yacht owners, but sanctioned persons, be they companies or individuals. And the most up-to-date that I could find has in fact been published by the UK. And I'm going to put the link. It comes from the Office of Financial Sanctions Implementation of Her Majesty's Treasury. But it's a list of all the individuals and companies that have been sanctioned, and we need to do our own research to find out whether some of them are yacht owners. I mean, there are obvious names that we will all recognize, but per se, there is no official list of sanctioned yacht owners published by any government or the EU.
Perfect. Thanks, Christophe. So the next question that's just come through is, do you think that the reg flag states will follow UK's sanctions?
It's very likely. The Isle of Man has already started going down that route. When it comes to the sanctions, it depends on the type of sanction. For instance, let's take Cayman Islands. How many vessels are ever going to show up in their ports and get detained there? It's not going to happen. So that type of sanction is irrelevant in some parts of the Red Ensign Group. The total response of the Red Ensign Group, I think, is going to follow very closely along the lines of what the UK does.
Okay, thanks, Rod. Okay, so I will just move on to the next one. So can a captain own a seized vessel or write out?
It's very difficult to understand that question, Stacey.
So you go ahead, Christophe.
No, I mean, it's very difficult to understand this question, but the following one is very interesting. In our case, we are a yacht that is subject to sanctions but not seized. P&I has been cancelled and management company has recused itself. Is the master legally obliged to report these events to flag and class?
I don't see that class is immediately involved there. If the P&I coverage was stopped at the moment that the vessel was sanctioned, that would seem to me something important that should be drawn to the attention of the flag state, because that has an effect on the liability exposure of compensation for liability exposure in the event of an accident regarding the welfare of the crew. And that is an issue that was brought up at Yacht last week by a representative of an insurance company there, that the moment that a vessel is sanctioned, the P&I coverage stops, it freezes at that moment. And that is something that all crews should be made aware of.
Thank you, Rod.
Rod, I think we had a little bit of internet connection problems as you were saying that, but I think we got the gist of that. Perfect. Okay, so one other question that's come through is, so can REG flag states, or can the flag states deregister a yacht or stop COR? So Rod, can you answer that one?
Yes, they can.
Simple.
You would be good for TV interviews, Rod. Yes, we can. The journalists would be ever so embarrassed. Love it. I don't know if any journalists are with us today, but yeah. And indeed, I think it's the Isle of Man who's done this already,
Yes.
haven't they?
Yes,
yeah.
they've done some of that deregistration.
And if I understand rightly, deregistration means that the insurance is cancelled and the boat with no insurance cannot move. Is it the case? Yeah. Yeah.
So they wouldn't be welcome in any port. And if they're in a port, they wouldn't be allowed to move because they might do some damage when they're moving.
Yeah, and I have a question. I've been, watching the news recently, and these past few days. What are the consequences for a boat that has been seized and the crew has departed? I mean, there are maintenance issues, and we understand that the vessel could very quickly, lose some of its capacities to operate.
Well, with the furnishings and the equipment on today's yachts, especially the very, very big yachts, it only takes a few days of systems being turned off. So there's no air conditioning running in the interior, for instance. There's no pumps running. All the machinery just stops and sits idle. The vessel will start to deteriorate mechanically and otherwise very, very quickly. Now, that's not a concern for crew, though. That's a concern for whoever owned that yacht in the first place. It's something that's going to keep the insurers up all night. And it's also an issue for the port in which such vessel is contained. It's going to be a nice legal question that if they detain a vessel under these circumstances, what right do they have actually to place on board a watch-keeping crew, a fire watch crew, for instance? I'm sure there's got a lot of heads being scratched over that right now.
Perfect. Rod, one question that's just come through, which I think it's a really good question. So if the flag state chooses to deregister a vessel, who should the crew revert to then?
That's another good question. I've got to come up with a super answer. Up to the moment of deregistry, the flag state had a responsibility to the crew. By deregistering, the flag state is not taking a deliberate act to abrogate all their care and concern and responsibilities towards crew. So channels should be kept open there. And then after flag state, there's port state, which is a different story. But again, if crew find themselves stood on the quay because they've been required to leave a sanctioned vessel, they should make their case to the original flag state and to port state as well. And if they're PYA members, or even if they're not, open a file with us about their case.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Thanks, Rod. So someone's asked you here so there's no responsibility for a captain that leaves a seized yacht or a yacht with no funds.
There's no responsibility for a captain to do what?
So I think essentially the question is, would the captain who leaves a yacht that's been seized or a yacht that has no funds, what is their responsibility really in that scenario?
Well, if you have a long career, you're going to face that at some stage, once or even twice. There's no legal responsibility above and beyond whatever is in your contract with the owning entity. You got general legal responsibilities beyond that of acting always with due care and attention. But it's not unheard of for captains to, depending on the situation. If a vessel is in detention, crew have been required to leave the yacht, then there's nothing much that the captain can do. If the vessel's detained and the crew are still on board, he has at least a moral responsibility to do the best he can to make sure the crew have got all the records they need to fight their case for compensation, and also to keep them fed and watered as long as there's money in the safe or on the ship's credit card to do so. Nobody's going to sue that captain for collusion in the nefarious activities of the owner of that sanctioned yacht.
Okay, thanks, Rod. And in terms of the, I mean, you've sort of touched on, I think, broadly where crew now sit in different situations, but obviously there's the flag state, but where does the Maritime Labour Convention sit in terms of protection for crew in these sorts of situations?
Really no different.
Okay.
The First Amendment to MLC 2006 was the one that provided for insurance to be available for repatriation of crew. So, excuse me, all crew on a commercial vessel will have seen posted on a notice board a copy of that insurance. If they haven't already done so, then they should, before they leave the ship, make a copy of it, take a photograph of it or whatever. Because if they have to pay for their own repatriation costs, then they will be able to go back to that insurance company and make their individual claims, because there may not be any organized way that they can do it as a crew once they've been required to leave the vessel.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Rod. The next question is just regarding the regulations in France. So someone said, is there a recent departure notification rule in France? So do we now need to notify the authorities 24 hours in advance of departure? And then it goes on to say, is this to give them time to verify the connection?
I can see this might be a concern for perhaps a captain who thinks maybe his owning entity or his boss is about to be sanctioned. He should go about his business in a normal way, not suspecting, not making inferences, just following the normal procedures. In other words, if he intended anyway to move a yacht from A to B, or if he's been ordered to move a yacht from A to B, what are the normal procedures in that port with customs and immigration, and then go about complying with them.
Perfect. Okay. I mean, I think that's fair to say. I'm just looking at the questions panel. So we've got one question about just tying things up regarding the PYA at the end. So I will mention that at the end, but I can't see any other specific questions that have come through at this point. Christoph or Rod, are there any other points you wanted to add? I know in our recent advisory, we did discuss the options for crew if they had to, be left stranded either at a European port or in the USA. What should they do in those circumstances? I know, Rod, that you advised in our written advisory that crew in the US should try and depart as soon as possible, although these crew should be on visas. But what is the official advice?
It depends on the type of visa.
Okay.
Maybe crew have got full B1, B2, and then technically they may have the right when they leave the vessel to be a tourist and go and visit Disneyland for a few days. On the other hand, they can't stay around and walk the docks or approach crew agents and look for another job. That's something that they're not permitted to do. The same applies within the EU. If you have a Schengen visa, you're not allowed to use it to look for work. So if you put ashore from a yacht, you can't stay around and look for another one. And you follow the law, you have to go home and then start looking for another job from there.
Okay. And Rod, I know for crew who are, I think one of the pieces of information we did release is that the EU authorities have said for any Ukrainian citizen crew who have to leave their vessel and for whatever reason they don't have, or they're on rotation, but they obviously can't return home, there is an option to take up temporary EU residency now if you are a Ukrainian citizen. So that is something we did share with our members. Rod, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, but I know we also touched on the fact that if you're actually working on a Ukrainian flagged boat, you may have similar problems in access to funds and wages due to the banking system there obviously not functioning as it normally does. Is that right?
Yes. I can't give names, but I know from one management company that one of their managed yachts, which is Ukrainian owned, is already on the market because the Ukrainian owner, all his businesses in the Ukraine have just collapsed. He has no cash flow anymore to run a super yacht. Okay. And so that means there's no cash flow even to pay the crew their due wages. It's a very sad situation in many ways, and even Ukrainian crew on a red ensign flagged yacht can find themselves in the similar situation in that the management company may want to pay them, but can't get money to them if their bank is in the Ukraine. So there'll be a temporary adjustment period while new banking arrangements are made.
Okay, thanks.
And if I may, Stacey,
yes.
The advice you provided that is to say that all Ukraine citizen crew can be offered temporary residence in any EU country. I mean, this, of course, does not apply only to crew, but to any Ukrainian passport. And I think, if I remember rightly, they can have temporary residence for up to 3 years.
Yeah, that's right. That's what we included. Christoph, one question I think that's come through that I'm going to direct in your way is, does the PYA know of any yachts that no longer have any crew on board? So that's
yes.
Russian-linked yachts.
Yeah, indeed. We've heard of at least, yes, a major one who, the whole crew has been dismissed. I don't know if they've kept, as Rod suggested, mentioned a skeleton crew on board, but the whole crew of that boat has been dismissed, and there will most probably be others indeed.
Perfect. Okay, so quite a few questions are coming through, so I'm going to quickly direct them. So Rod, so someone has asked, I'm on a Russian boat. We are not sanctioned. However, we have signed a document that we will call 2 hours prior to any departure. I'm guessing when they say we will call, I guess, to the authorities, that call is to the police maritime, but we have been told that we can come and go.
So what is their issue?
So they've signed a document that says that they have to call 2 hours prior to any departure.
Oh, Rod, you've gone.
Rod, we've lost you for a second.
I'm not clear if we're talking about the departure of the vessel. Does the vessel need to give 2 hours notice before departure for sea?
It seems to me that's what's implied, and I would say, well, it depends on the document that was signed. I mean, if it was signed with the local authorities, local port authorities,
that's what they must do.
Absolutely, it's all about compliance at the end of the day. And what I should like to say is, I know that at least in France, the Préfecture Maritime and the maritime authorities are really there to help and assist. So if in doubt, any crew, any master, any captain, should really feel free to call the services of either the Semaphore or the Préfecture Maritime for clarification. But at the end of the day, it's all about compliance, as Rod has been saying.
Perfect. Okay, so just jumping on to our next question here. So if the yacht is sanctioned and the captain and crew leave the vessel, what should the captain do with any cash on board or ship's credit cards?
Let's not give any.
Okay, what you just do the sensible thing. You count it. You have 1 or 2 other people present when you count it. You report the amount that has been counted, take some photographs of piles of notes and bags of coins, whatever, to the management company or the office. Ask for instructions as to what you're to do with that cash from the management company or the owner's office. Otherwise, secure it in the safe. Have a statement that you secured it in the safe at such and such a date, such and such a time, witnessed by other crew, including the credit cards, and then depart if the port authorities ordered you to depart.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, Rod. And then this question is quite specific. I'm not sure if we can answer it, but you can give it a go, Rod. So if there is a connection, for example, the UBO has a Russian passport, but is a resident in an EU or NATO country, will it make a difference in the authorities' approach?
Approach to what aspect of this whole situation?
Whether or not, I mean, I guess maybe this question would be more applicable to crew who are worried, within the UK, any vessel which has a Russian link is not able to cruise or come into port. So I guess the question would be, if that vessel's owner is Russian, but he or she is a resident of another EU country or NATO country, would that vessel be seen then as a Russian linked vessel? Or would it be seen as not due to the owner's residency status in the EU or NATO country?
I don't see that the residency of the beneficial owner of the vessel would come into the equation.
Seems to me that if the owner is on the sanctioned list, well, then the boat will not move. If the person is not on such a list, the French Préfecture Maritime is applying the right of innocent passage. But again, when in doubt, be better to check with the authorities, really. Because again, Rod, I mean, one thing, you know, you often say, and is very true, you know, the captain's responsibilities can actually be huge. And I know for working with many captains that these guys, you know, often do not get all the assistance and the help they deserve. They're often alone. And indeed, when in doubt, you know, they should take as much information as possible and make an informed decision, really. Rod?
Yep. Go along with that.
Perfect. Okay. And so has the International Labour Organization issued any guidance for seafarers?
I haven't checked if what's come down from the ILO on this specific issue. Probably there will be something from the ITF, the International Transport Workers Federation, but they actually pay very little attention to the yacht sector, even the commercial yachts.
Okay. Perfect. And I can see there is quite a detailed question that has just come through. So I'm going to just read it to the best of my ability. So a ship with a Russian owner has been frozen since the 12th of March. The crew management company has indicated to stop working with the owner as of the 13th of March. They have sent an information letter to the crew indicating that they have terminated the contract with the owner. It seems that the management company doesn't want to pay the wages for the period between the 1st and the 12th of March, although the employment contract was active between the management company and the seafarers during that period. How can we get paid for this period before the management terminates contract with the owner as of the 12th of March?
You send that written question to the PYA office, and you give us some time to look into that, because it immediately brings up the question of who the owner is. The owner of any ship normally is the entity which is named on the certificate of registration. However, sometimes a management company assumes the legal being of the owner. In this case, we don't know, so we would need to have the specifics of the question given to us before we can come up with any kind of guidance.
And indeed, if I may, Stacey, the person who asked this question should really send the question by email to advice@pya.org. That will give us your own email address so that we can communicate with you. So advice@pya.org.
Yeah, and then we can come back with the follow-up questions for information that we need before we can give the guidance.
Perfect. Okay, so very last question. So someone has asked you, what about crew on a sanctioned yacht that is moving outside EU waters or international waters? Do they have any responsibilities to report the location or bring the yacht in?
Well, no yacht's going to float around out there in international waters forever. So sooner or later it's going to arrive in port. It seems to me a little bit of a hypothetical question, because I'm sure if a vessel has been sanctioned, whoever sanctioned it knows all about that vessel and what it's doing and where it is anyway.
Okay, perfect. Okay, perfect. So I think we've pretty much run through all our list of questions. I know there was just one question here of if crew are in doubt of what to do, who should they, the captain or crew, consult for advice? I mean, we've obviously said throughout the webinar, you know, feel free to email advice@pya.org to access, whether you're a member or not, you can access our PYA advisory service. Obviously, we've also said the maritime authorities where your boat is based or the port office should be able to also help you. Is there anybody else? And we've said flag state as well for in terms of repatriation. Is there anybody else crew can ask?
Well, as we said, there's flag state, there's port state. Also, PYA can try and help. But don't forget, management companies have a role here. If they've been engaged at all in managing the vessel, they can't just walk away and shrug it off and say, well, the vessel's been sanctioned, as we have no further connection with it.
Okay. Fine. And I think, so one question's just come in. I think this was just in relation to what we've just been speaking about. So I'm going to just finish off here. So someone has said, I'm planning a long passage. What should we do if the new sanctions are introduced during our sailing? So I think this is crew who are concerned, who are they're in international waters or they're sailing, and you know, their boats is subject to sanction or change of regulation. What should they do?
Well, as we've been discussing, they need to prepare for that vessel, if it is sanctioned while at sea, to prepare for it being detained when it arrives in port.
Okay.
Go through all the things we've been talking about, because be prepared for the fact that they may be required to leave the vessel, and what are they going to need to take with them to make sure that all their claims on that vessel can be legally justified.
Perfect. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rod. I think those are all our questions for today. But as I've said, if anybody's got any further questions, feel free to email me directly at communications@pya.org, or if you've got a question that needs advice@pya.org. Perfect. Crystal, I can see you've got one last thing to say.
Yes, they've been, I mean, I know, Stacey, you are managing different screens at the time, but there have been a couple more questions, including, you know, it's all about contact numbers. And indeed, in one of our latest advisory, we've published the contact details of several flag states where, you know, crew could ask questions. These are probably available on our website. And there was a question earlier as to, you know, what does the PYA do? Well, the PYA, we are not only the voice of professional yacht crew, but we are here to help. And as has been mentioned several times, one of our most valuable service to PYA members, not only to PYA members, but we hope that after the assistance we've provided, you know, seafarers will join, who have not, will join the PYA. One of our most valuable activity is our member assistance service, where you all know it, you know, we get all sorts of questions. And as Rod said, we have to ask you questions back, you know, because not one answer fits all. It depends on the nationality of the seafarer, the flag of the boat, where the boat is, where the boat came back. And really, our small team of the member assistance service is really doing an amazing tailored work to assist seafarers who have issues, often quite severe and dramatic. So that's one other thing we do. Another thing we do, we represent the interest of you know, professional yacht crews with the authorities. I'm French, so I can say that. Recently, the French have you know, issued a new law, but doing it the very French way, banning anchoring in some areas without having thought of alternative solutions. So the result was that you know, number of yachts had decided to depart French waters, and a yacht that's gone will never come back. So we've worked a lot with the French authorities to try to develop alternative solutions so that, you know, yachts can come back and anchor in a safe and appropriate manner. So we do training, we do workshops, but more importantly, we do what you, the professional yacht crew, will think we should be doing. So do not hesitate to forward to us, either at, why not to me directly, ceo@pya.org, any suggestions for activities that you think the PYA should do, which would be beneficial to you. We've received quite a few of them, and it's been actually very, very useful. Stacey, over to you.
Brilliant. Perfect. Thanks, Christoph. And just to add on that, I mean, I know it was asked in the chat if we could just give a bit of an overview of the PYA. And as Christopher said, you know, in addition to all of those services, we verify sea time for crew. Yes. And we've just launched a very innovative tool that's very beneficial to all seafarers, you know, as you're based all over the world. but now our digital service, well, our service record book has now gone digital, and we launched our digital service record book last year. We've issued over 2,000 DSRBs to our members. So that is included as part of your membership. We can verify your sea service testimonials. We issue yacht rating certificates. We can certify your documentation here in our office in Antibes. And we also assist with applications for NOEs and COCs with the MCA. So yeah, so there's a range of services that we do. But as Christoph said, I think that the main thing is we serve the crew. And if you've got any suggestions or there's anything you'd like us to raise or represent on your behalf, we're here to listen.
If I could add one more note to that. We sit on various committees and subgroups with the MCA, with the colleges that run the training systems, the boards that set up the exams for your different levels of certification. We are constantly in touch with the people that monitor and administer this entire industry. So anybody that has any suggestions about certification, about the exam system, about the lack of fitness for purpose of any part of the training that they go through, it's never going to get to the ears of the people concerned unless it comes to us, because we are the only body that sits on those committees. There is nobody else representing the crew except the PYA.
Thanks, Rod. I think, yeah, I think hopefully, hopefully everyone, understands our position now. And, as you said, we're here to represent crew. So unless there's any last points, I'm just going to tie up the webinar. Thank you to everyone who's still with us. I can see there's quite a few of you. So thank you very much. Anybody who wants to sign up as a member, do take advantage of our discount code WEB20 via our website. And yeah, take a look out because we will be having another webinar coming up soon. So thank you. Thanks, Rod. Thanks, Christoph. And thanks to all our attendees.
Thank you, Stacey.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.